Oh boy, second week in a row about sowing and seeds and all of that. This one has always intrigued me a bit more. Because like the one that we heard last week, there's really two parts to it, and we just proclaimed the first part tonight. Second part of the gospel, if you take a look, there's an explanation that supposedly Jesus gives as to what the parable means, who the sower is and who the enemy is and what the weeds are and what the wheat, blah, 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 blah. That's not the purpose of a parable. It's not the same as a symbolic story where you're just supposed to come away and say, oh, okay, I understand it. Yeah, that's clever. Parable that Jesus told, it had very little to do with agriculture, farming practices, but it was usually meant to try and teach something about God or God's kingdom. And so these explanations that come at the end of these parables, Scripture scholars believe that they were like added on later on, that it really wasn't part of Jesus' teaching at the time. Because the real power of a parable comes from the hook, comes from the unexpected thing that catch people's attention, whether it's an exaggeration or whether it's just somebody acting in a way that they shouldn't or you wouldn't expect. So remembering the world of Jesus at the time of Jesus, the society, the culture, you could say that it was agonistic, which is kind of like antagonistic, okay? But definitely the way people interacted with each other, there was a great deal of hostility and sometimes conflict. Jesus tells a story. Man goes out, he sows wheat. Then his enemy comes and sows weeds. Okay, notice Jesus doesn't say a bad person did this. It's done without comment. And people listening to this would naturally think, oh, okay, if this other person sowed these weed seeds, must have been first man's enemy. And then I can see him doing that. He'd be able to shame, to embarrass the sower. And the neat thing is, it won't show that he has gotten one up on him right away. Not until the plants start showing and growing and the weeds appear with the wheat. And then everybody can look. See, okay. Got him. Got him good. So the man with the wheat, he would have been publicly embarrassed and humiliated. And he would have had to live with that embarrassment the entire time until harvest. Because everybody could look and see and be reminded His enemy got him. And that's the kind of stuff they used to delight in. That's what I meant by saying that there was a great deal of hostility for people that weren't in your family and weren't in your tribe. Honor you would get if you could shame someone else. So supposedly, this man who has planted the field, he has the entire village laughing at him. And certainly the townspeople would expect that this man who had been punked, shall we say, would find a way to get even, to embarrass his enemy so that he could get some of his honor back. But the landowner didn't do that. He let them grow together. And that maybe is the thing that caught crowd's attention who was listening to it. That was the hook. That was the unexpected. Why wouldn't he get even? Why would he take this embarrassment? Why would he agree to be punked like this? Something's going on here. Landowner, savvy farmer, and also a very obviously secure individual, said, let them grow together. The wheat will be strong enough to not be adversely affected by the weeds. And when the time came for harvest, that's when the landowner got his one-upsmanship. Because not only was he able to harvest his field of wheat, but he also was able to harvest bundles of weeds, and first collect the weeds and tie them in bundles for burning. Okay, that sounds like, okay, we'll just get rid of them then. But no. My enemy has provided me with a source of fuel. I get 2 harvests for the price of 1. And that's what Jesus was speaking of, not farming practices, but cultural values. To a people who were very convinced of the need for vengeance, of the need for one-upsmanship, Jesus gives them an example of another way. The weeds and the wheat growing together. Like in each of our lives. Like in our world. There's good and there's bad. There's good and there's bad inside of me. There's good and there's bad in our society and our culture. And boy, it sure seems like nowadays we've all gotten very good at identifying what the bad is, who the weeds are. We've gotten to the point of being convinced that they are so toxic that they must be rooted up, no matter what it takes. You look throughout history, and even the history of the church, how many times has violence been used to supposedly bring about purity? To take care of a threat. What about in ourselves? How quick am I to say that the garden of my heart, the garden of my family, my city, my church, it has to be only wheat. Got to get rid of the weeds. God is saying, let them grow together. Good will come of it if we have the long view. If we don't go into immediate panics. One raw, windy day in spring, a snail started to climb a cherry tree. Some birds in a nearby tree sniped their ridicule. "Hey, you dumb snail," squawked one of them. "Where do you think you're going?" "Why are you climbing that tree?" others chimed in. "There's no cherries on it." The snail replied with a snail-type smile. "There will be by the time I get there." Why doesn't God take care of things right now? The eternal question of good and evil. If we truly believe that God is in charge, that He is using the wheat and the weeds to grow His kingdom, to bring about His purpose in His time, maybe we don't have to be so panicked and so worried all the time. Maybe we don't have to be so convinced that, oh, everything's just falling apart. This must be the end of the world. A trust in goodness that is greater than the fear of wickedness could be a powerful weapon against rampant, senseless violence. To trust. Yes, to work, to stand for good, but to not try to be God. Because somehow we think that God isn't doing His job. God's just fine. Let the weeds and the wheat grow together. When the harvest comes, it will be a more amazing harvest than we thought, than we could realize. Because God is doing it His way.